Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing a way too early 2028 election prediction between Republican Vice President of the United States J.D. Vance, who I am predicting will be the Republican nominee for 2028, and Democratic Governor of the state of Kentucky, Andy Beshear. He is one of several potential Democratic nominees for 2028, so I thought it would be fun to do this hypothetical scenario and see how I see it all going. So Andy Beshear is a very interesting Democratic candidate, and I think he would do a good job at potentially with some more rural and suburban voters than other Democrats would do. But I think he would really hurt himself among a lot of the Democratic voter group in, for instance, with Black voters and Hispanic voters, kind of voting demographics that President Trump and J.D. Vance made a lot of inroads with in 2024. I'm not sure if Andy Beshear is necessarily the right Democratic candidate to win those back in 2028. And I think if you look at the 2024 election, for example, you'll see Donald Trump got over 77 million votes. Kamala Harris got over 75 million votes. There was a lot of very high voter turnout, really on both sides. Both parties' bases were very animated and like jacked to get out and vote. I'm not so sure in Andy Beshear versus J.D. Vance, and that will necessarily be the case. I think it'd be more of a lower turnout election, especially compared to the last like 3 or 4 presidential elections. I would say it'd be more in the lower voter turnout side, where I think it's going to start out pretty similarly, where you would have some safe states to go through. So all the West Coast states, I think, will all be over 15% margin of victory. I think Alaska would go safe for J.D. Vance, as would Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, the Dakotas, Nebraska at large, and Nebraska 1 and Nebraska 3, Kansas, Oklahoma. Texas is interesting because we did just see Donald Trump win it over Kamala Harris by 14 points. Would Andy Beshear be able to make some inroads here and get some of those voters back that Harris lost? That's certainly possible, but I don't know if Beshear being the governor of Kentucky is really going to resonate much at a national level in a state like Texas, or even just at all, in all honesty. So I think Texas would go safe for J.D. Vance of over 15%. The state of Colorado did vote for Kamala Harris by 11 points. So I can't exactly put it as safe Democrat for Beshear versus Vance, but at very least, likely Democrat in between 5 points and 15 points at the absolute bare minimum there. The state of New Mexico, I don't think is going to be too dissimilar. It was a 6-point win for Harris over Trump in 2024. In 2028, I don't see why Andy Beshear would do any worse than Kamala Harris did in New Mexico, unless there's a big trend in 2026, the midterm elections we have not seen yet. I expect both of these states to start out as likely Democrat. As for Nebraska's 2nd district, we did see it go for Kamala Harris by 5 points in Harris versus Trump. I don't see why, again, in this scenario, it's more of a suburban, fast-growing district. I think Andy Beshear does probably about the same, maybe a little bit better, putting it as likely Democrat, but nothing really too significant of a change there. We get into the south part of the country where Democrats may think Andy Beshear will try and get more of these voters, but I don't think there's really going to be much of a difference here. I expect all these states to go red, including Beshear's home state of Kentucky. And as for maybe Democrats think Kentucky will be competitive, it voted for Trump by over 30 points in 2024. I don't think Beshear, even in his best case scenario, can do enough to swing Kentucky that much towards the Republican direction. So now we get into sort of the Midwest and the Sun Belt part of the country. Illinois and its 19 electoral votes. We did just see Kamala Harris win it by about 11 points. Maybe Andy Beshear does better than Kamala Harris here, but I think Illinois starts out as likely Democrat. It could just be a swing in one election. Maybe Illinois goes back to over 15% in 2028, but for now, I'm going to leave it as a likely Democratic state. The state of Iowa voted for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris by 13 points. This would be a likely Republican state. I don't think in a state like Iowa, Andy Beshear is going to do any worse than Kamala Harris. If anything, he might actually do better in a state like Iowa. So I'm going to put Iowa off for now in the likely Republican column. As for the state of Ohio, J.D. Vance's home state, Donald Trump won the state by 11 points. This would also be a likely Republican state. And again, I don't see much of a difference here, other than Beshear maybe gaining a point or so, but nothing really too drastic in Ohio. Beshear is at 113, Vance is at 179. as we start to move towards the Midwest and the southern part of the country. The state of Florida, we did just see Donald Trump win it by 13 points over Kamala Harris. The trend has been moving more and more Republican every single election. This is one I think Vance may actually even do better than Trump just due to the fact Florida continues to trend so Republican. So I think Florida goes in the safe Republican column. South Carolina was an 18-point win for Trump. That's going to be safe Republican. Georgia and North Carolina, we're going to come back to. Virginia ended up being about a 6-point win for Harris over Trump. I do think Andy Beshear would do a pretty good job at winning a lot of the Democratic suburbs and maybe even doing better than Hillary Clinton there, or than Kamala Harris there, excuse me, not Hillary Clinton, than Kamala Harris. So I think Virginia would stay a likely Democratic state. DC will definitely stay safe Democratic, as will Maryland. Delaware, I believe, will stay safe as well. New Jersey, this is a fascinating one where New Jersey only ended up being a 6-point win for Harris over Trump in 2024. I have to start New Jersey off right now as likely Democratic. It could be a swing from 2024 to 2028. Maybe Republicans capitalize on it. Maybe not. Maybe it swings more back towards closer to a safe Democratic state. We're going to have to wait and see. But I think New Jersey starts off as likely Democrat for right now. Going into New England, we saw New York voting for about 12 points for Harris versus Trump. Connecticut was about 14 points. Rhode Island, 14 points as well. There's a question to be made that can Vance do as well as Trump did in New York? Maybe Connecticut and Rhode Island, Massachusetts are all going to be safe Democratic, as will the state of Vermont. New York, I'm on the edge between safe Democratic and likely Democratic. I'm going to go on the side and say New York goes back to safe Democratic, but that could also end up being a likely Democratic state as well. We're going to have to wait and see on that one. New Hampshire, I'm going to come back to because I do think it could be a very important swing state. As for the state of Maine, it voted about 7 points at the state level for Harris over Trump. So I think Andy Beshear would win the state of Maine in the likely Democratic margin. The first district would go red. The second district, or the first district would go solid blue. The second district, I think, would go likely red to maybe lean red. It voted for Donald Trump by about 10 points. So likely red, so I'll start it for now. So Vance starts off about 219. Beshear's at about 212. This is pretty much in line with what the electoral map was in 2024. The only difference this time around is there are a lot more likely Democratic states than there were in 2024. We didn't really anticipate New Jersey being a likely Democratic state, thought that was solidly safe. And you can make the argument for the state of Virginia as well. But Illinois and New York, I think, are pretty much Democratic strongholds. Maybe they get more Democratic. I'm actually going to shift Illinois to safe Democrat. But again, we'll have to wait and see how this goes. Andy Beshear versus JD Vance. It's an interesting matchup because they're in an interesting spot. I don't think they're going to turn out. For instance, I don't think JD Vance will turn out as many Republican voters as passionately and strongly as Donald Trump did. But I also don't think Donald Trump being on the ballot drove out a lot of Democratic voters as well that are very strong in opposition to Trump. I'm not sure there'll be the same number of Democratic opposition to a Vance bid as the same as a Trump bid. So this election is really going to be tough to kind of piece apart because I think you have two candidates who are probably going to be very well versed on policy and probably very respectful of each other as well. And it won't be a Trump versus Harris type of election or even Trump versus Biden type of election. It's going to be, I think, a more level-headed, slow-paced one between Beshear and Vance. Getting into some of the swing states now, I'll start in New England with the state of New Hampshire. This is one I think Republicans are probably targeting. Harris did win it by about 3 points. I think for right now, Beshear would also defeat J.D. Vance here in a lean Democratic column. But I do think Vance may do a little bit better than Trump in New Hampshire, but I think it stays as lean Democratic right now at the presidential level. A big reason being New Hampshire has not voted Democrat for president since the 2000 election, where George Bush narrowly won it over Al Gore. It has not voted Republican at the presidential level since then, so I'm going to leave it as lean Democrat for right now. Beshear's at 216, Vance at 219. The state of North Carolina, Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris here by 3 points. In the state, I think this is probably remains about the same. We always see about a trend of 1 to 2 points in North Carolina from each presidential election to the next. I think Vance wins it in a lean Republican margin. Arizona, Donald Trump won the state by 5 points over Kamala Harris. This is a pretty big pushback. 5 points would actually be a likely Republican win based on the ratings of 5 to 15. I do think Andy Beshear, though, I feel like this is a state, Arizona, that's kind of made for him in terms of being a more establishment Democrat and maybe getting more appeal in the state of Arizona. But J.D. Vance also doesn't have the negative ties with the McCain family that Trump did, which hurt him back in 2020. Didn't hurt him as much in 2024. I think Vance wins Arizona, but I think he wins it in a much closer margin, probably like 3 to 4 points instead of 5 in 2028 versus Andy Beshear. This puts Vance at 246, Beshear's at 216. The state of Nevada and its 6 electoral votes, this was a big surprise in 2024. I did predict Donald Trump would win the state, but I thought it'd be very close and Trump would win it by under 1% of the vote, and ended up going for Trump by 4 points over Kamala Harris, getting a majority of the vote, 51% to 47%, a lean win for Trump over Harris. Vance, I do think will be able to still hold the state of Nevada. I'm not sure if it's going to be lean or tilt, but given the way it performed for Trump, I kind of want to say it's going to be lean, but I am going to put it as tilt Republican for right now, just because I think there could be a little bit of a Democratic pushback in Nevada, especially if tax on tips is not necessarily talked about as much on the ballot. Maybe Nevada's Republican turnout isn't as strong as it was for Trump in 2024. I give Vance under 1%, the state of Nevada. Now we move into the really, really competitive states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. The state of Minnesota and its 10 electoral votes, we did see Kamala Harris win here by about 4% over Donald Trump. Here we have Andy Beshear versus J.D. Vance. I actually think Beshear does better than Kamala Harris potentially, just barely getting it to 5%, putting Minnesota just on the edge of a likely Democratic win. Vance is at 252, Beshear is at 226. The state of Georgia is fascinating because Georgia did trend back towards Donald Trump. Donald Trump did win the state by about 2%, but he also did not do as great in the surrounding Atlanta area. This either stayed the same or got a little bit bluer. The rest of the state got redder. Georgia's going to continue to be a 1% margin of victory, I think, for a very long time at the presidential level. Andy Beshear, he's not going to get the same level of black turnout in the state of Georgia that Kamala Harris could get or even Joe Biden could get, but maybe J.D. Vance won't get the same number of rural voters to turn out for him that Donald Trump got either. It's going to be very close in Georgia. I'm going to narrowly give it to J.D. Vance by about under 1%. I think it's going to be maybe even the closest state in the entire country, but that's certainly one I could certainly see happening here. Into the 3 Rust Belt states, Beshear versus Vance. This is actually a fascinating one. The 3 Rust Belt states have voted in unison in every election, I believe, going back until the 1980s, and I'm very skeptical about breaking these up, but we don't have any polling data to go off of, so I'm kind of just going off on a hunch here. For some reason, I think the state of Wisconsin, yes, it swung back for Donald Trump, and he did win it in 2024, 49.7 to Harris getting 48.8. For some reason, I could just imagine Wisconsin swinging back a little bit more towards the Democratic side, especially for Andy Beshear. He won't get, again, the same level of black turnout as Kamala Harris, but he may do a little bit better in the rural suburban areas as well. I kind of want to give Wisconsin under 1% to Andy Beshear over J.D. Vance. The state of Michigan is going to be really, really tight. It voted by 1.4% for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. Beshear, I'm not sure will be able to have as much of an impact in a state like Michigan that J.D. Vance will have. I think J.D. Vance narrowly wins the state of Michigan under 1 point. You're kind of getting a trend here of I don't think Vance would perform as well as Trump would in a lot of these places, but I don't think Andy Beshear is necessarily the right Democratic candidate to really get a lot of votes to turn out for the Democrats either. Lastly, the state of Pennsylvania, 50.4% for Trump in 2024, Harris 48.7%. This is one where Andy Beshear, being the governor of Kentucky, will try and have an appeal. Vance, being from Ohio, may have a similar appeal that might offset each other. I think Pennsylvania would go for Vance, under 1%. If Wisconsin does go blue for Vance over Beshear, I think it would be something like under 1% as well. Or for Beshear over Vance, would be under 1%, like 0.3 or 0.4 or something around that nature. So for Vance versus Beshear, I don't think this is one of the more likelier matchups to happen. I think there are a lot of more, I would say, progressive Democratic candidates that are more likely to be nominated in 2028 than Andy Beshear. Yes, he's the Democrat of a red state in Kentucky, but I'm not sure in the 2028 Democratic primary when there'll be a lot of candidates if that'll necessarily be able to help him get over the hump. I think Vance starts out with about 302 electoral votes, Beshear 236. I'm interested to hear what you think about this video. Obviously, there's not really any polling data to go off of yet, so I'm just a lot of this going off of the election results of 2024, my own personal analysis for the 2028 presidential election. This is all very contingent, of course, also on how the Trump-Vance administration is doing. At the time, the only opinion polls being done so far shows Donald Trump being approved of more than disapproved of, so that would certainly be a good sign for Vance. But again, this is all speculative. We're going to have to wait and see how the next 4 years develop. Leave a comment below telling me your thoughts on what this election matchup would look like, and remember to hit that subscribe button so you always get notified when I post a new video and you keep coming back for all my future videos. Thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.